Hey VC members, it's Matt and I'm just checking in. I was not going to do a video this weekend, but then I'm hanging around the house and I figured I might as well go ahead and continue along with the Beach Boy records that I'm doing reviews of in order. So it's getting tougher sledding. It's getting not getting any easier here, but we're at the point where counting this one, there's 5 albums to go to the bitter end. So since I've written it out this far, I figure I'll just take it all the way to the end. And yeah, we get to this, the Beach Boys album named The Beach Boys. And so this came out in June 10th of 1985. This would be at the time their longest gap between new albums. They had last album before this came out in 1980, so you got a 5 year gap. They had Holland in what was that, 73, and then they didn't have another album, 15 Big Ones, until 76. So you'd had a period where you'd had a 3 year gap there. But other than that, they had an album out every year until this 1980 to 85 5 year gap there. Of course, a lot of things happened in between this. Dennis Wilson, one of the founding members of the band, the drummer, he died in December 28th of 1983, unfortunately, so he's not on this. There was actually a song that he and Brian had written in 1982 that was considered for the album, a song called "Oh Lord," but it was ended up not making the cut and it's not on the album. I don't know if it ever got released in a box set or somewhere later on, but that's not there. So there's no Dennis on this album, unfortunately, and a lot of stuff had changed musically between 1980 and 1985. 1980 was, uh, in my opinion, with the exception of the 60s, that period of, say, 76, 77 to about 82, 83 was one of the best periods of music ever as far as new, good, and exciting music. Like I said, only second to the 60s. As far as rock, pop, and soul, I mean, you can make arguments for jazz and blues back in the 20s to the 50s, uh, classical music way back when, but as far as popular music, I guess. So, but then by 1985, 80 started out great. The first half was great musically and otherwise. The second half, not so much. And somewhere around mid 85, music, sort of, in my opinion, not to say that there was never any good music past that, but music nosedived precipitously and has never really recovered since. So, unfortunately, but of course, in 1980, there was no such thing as MTV. There's a couple of videos from this that showed up on MTV, and this is produced by Steve Levine, the guy who produced Culture Club's albums. It's kind of a strange fit for the Beach Boys, and not a very good one, as it turns out, unfortunately. A lot of the bands, a lot of the 60s bands didn't fare too well in the 80s. They kind of, this big 60s and 70s bands, because they kind of lost their way chasing the new sounds in music that were current at that time and thinking they needed to adapt to that sort of thing, and it just wasn't a good fit. The Who, um, Paul McCartney made some Duff albums, and the Neil Young, quite a few. So it's not just the Beach Boys, but um, anyway, what else to say about this? This went nowhere. It got to number 52 in the United States, got to number 60 in England. There were a couple of singles. One of the singles got to number 26. I don't know what the other one did. I should have looked, but just didn't care enough to be honest with you. The single that got to number 26, I don't remember ever hearing it on the radio. I think I remember seeing a video or two from this on MTV at the time, but didn't really make any impression on me, and I don't remember them. So let's get on to the songs, I guess. The last 3 albums that I reviewed of theirs, from 78, 79, and 80, were not great, weren't anywhere near as good as their albums that came before that. And in fact, they're pretty bad, but at least they had their moments. This one is even worse than the last 3 that precede it, unfortunately. And of course, by 85, no one cared about the Beach Boys, other than as an oldies act. and it's kind of a shame that they even bothered to make an album. But let's go through the tracks real quick. The first track, side one, is called Get You Back. Get You Back. In other words, Love and Terry Melcher wrote it. Mike Love and Brian sing lead. That's the one that got to number 26. It's kind of got the old Beach Boys sound of the old 60s Beach Boys, but it's okay. It's just a shame that because they had post Pet Sounds, they had that run of albums, as I've said in all these videos, that they were, we did the 60s thing, now we're moving on to something else, and they were still trying to be innovative and break new ground, and they made all these great albums, 2020 and Sunflower and Holland and Surf's Up, and unfortunately those albums didn't really go anywhere, at least not to the extent that their 60s stuff had found success, so they kind of just gave up, and in a way you can't really blame them. Past Love You, they kind of just sort of gave up, I guess, unfortunately. And of course, I don't know so much that Brian gave up as that he was just out of it with mental problems and drug use and depression and so forth. And of course, Dennis, who had come on as a songwriter from about the time of Friends up until pretty much up until the 80 album, really good songwriter. He's kind of the George Harrison of the group in a way, I guess, that he didn't do much songwriting wise early on, but then later on he kind of blossomed as a songwriter and was a really good one, more introspective and than his brother Brian. Not as great a songwriter as Brian, because few people are, but still a really great one. So anyway, they just sort of, those albums didn't do much sales-wise or chart-wise or radio play-wise, and most people don't know those songs and those albums now, which is a shame because there's some really great albums, but at some point the band just kind of reverted to living on past glories and trying to recapture their old sound and just sort of give the people what they want, unfortunately, and this is definitely a case of that. So, yeah, while Get You Back kind of sort of sounds like an old Beach Boys song from the 60s, it's a shame that they're forced into or chose to go into that mode of just the comfortable, easy way out and just play to the audience instead of still trying to break musical, be innovative and fresh musical ideas. It's an okay song. It's probably this and one other would probably tie for the best on the album. I'm going to give it a 5. It's not a bad song. Some people say it sort of sounds like "Hungry Heart" by Bruce Springsteen, which I sort of hear bits and pieces in there. I kind of think it sounds like "Uptown Girl" by Billy Joel at times in an odd way. I give it a 5. And that's pretty much the highlight of the album, unfortunately. So, second song is called "It's Getting Late," which was written by Carl Wilson and some other people. I didn't care enough to write their names down, and you don't care, I don't care, so who cares? Carl sings it. It's a very, very mid to late 80s sounding, sort of that cheesy. And as a matter of fact, here's the back. They're in their pastels and their Miami Vice 80s cool look there, which is, we can laugh at it now, but I mean, I guess, that was the thing back then. Just really, there was great 80s music and there was bad, cheesy 80s music. This is just, It's Getting Late is bad, cheesy 80s music. Got some not very good vocals, got some good vocals in there too. Either way, it's not much of a song, not enough to save the song. But for some of the good vocals, I'll go a 3 on that. And the song lyrics, for the most part, are pretty I don't know, just cut rate and obvious and juvenile and cliche. It's the guy had the girl and now the girl's run off with another guy and the guy wants the girl back. The girl doesn't know the guy exists and he wants the girl to notice him because they'd be so good together if only he could get her to notice him. The guy's going out with the girl, but she hadn't given it up yet, and he's getting anxious for some hot loving. The guy's in love with the girl, and she's not around, and he missed it. And it's just stuff like that. So there's nothing much. Where were we? Number 3, "Crack at Your Love," written by Brian and Al Jardine, sung by Al and Brian. Um, it's just another, if he could get the girl to notice her, they'd be so great together. But she doesn't know he's alive type lyrics. Bad instrumentation on this sinks the song, which probably wouldn't be that great of a song even if it had a good melody and good music behind it. But I give that 2.5. Number 4 is "Maybe I Don't Know" by Carl. It's written by Carl, sung by Carl. This really bad 80s sounding music just doesn't fit the Beach Boys, just doesn't work. And I know that at the time, at the present time, they were probably thinking we got to change our sound to be hip and modern, but in retrospect, it's just such a bad mistake. But this sounds like really third-rate Richard Marx, Billy Ocean music. It's just really bad, sort of a terrible power ballad guitar that you had in a lot of those 80s. That sort of really slick produced, just soulless plastic music behind it. I give it a 0. Number 5 song that closes out side 1 is called "She Believes in Love Again." This is written by Bruce Johnston and is sung by Carl and Bruce. It's pure schlock, just crap. It's like Climax Blues Band, only worse. It's just terrible. It's a 0. Side 2 opens up with something called "California Calling," which is written by Al Jardine and Brian, sang by Mike and Al. It's the most upbeat song so far. It's something that actually sounds like it has a pulse to it instead of just plastic produced elevator music. So I give it that. But it's like they're trying to rewrite Surfing USA light version. It doesn't work. What at that point would be 20 years after the fact. It'd be like Paul McCartney going in and trying to come up with another, I don't know, "P.S. I Love You" or "Love Me Do" now. It just doesn't work. You can't go home type thing. Ringo plays drums on it, and he does a pretty good job. The song's just nothing there. It's upbeat. I'll give it that. I'll give it a 2.5. Yeah. Song number 2 on side 2 is called "Passing Friend," and it's written by Roy Hay and George O'Dowd, who, of course, is Boy George. Both those guys were in Culture Club. Carl sings lead. Sounds like a bad Culture Club song, and not exactly bad, but it just sounds like a leftover or something that the Culture Club bunch maybe had written when they were putting together their albums, and that didn't make the cut, and they had this leftover, and the Beach Boys called for a song, and they said, "Yeah, just give them that thing." Sounds like Culture Club, even though it's Carl singing. And this is also about 85. Culture Club was pretty much on the way to being washed up has-been band. They were big in 82, 83, 84, pretty much on the fadeaway by 85. And if you like Culture Club, you might like the Beach Boys doing a Culture Club song, but it's not nothing to write home about. I give it 2.5. And I was never huge on Culture Club one way or another. "Church of the Poison Mind's" pretty good song. A couple of their other songs were alright on the radio, but this doesn't even measure up to their hits. It's just sort of something to be tucked away on their album, and not a very good song. Number 3 is "I'm So Lonely," written by Brian and sung by Brian and Carl. This is the first song that actually has some what feels like genuine, real heart and soul and emotion to it. It's about being lonely and being sad, which certainly Brian at this point in his life was still deeply mixed up in depression and with Dr. Landy and not in a very good spot. And that's why I wonder, he was active in this album, but he was probably out of it to quite a bit, that you wonder if he even really knew what was going on sad to say, or remembers much of this, because he would come out with his solo album here in just a few short years, his first solo album, which is controversial because of the Dr. Landy ties, but still is a really good album and a lot better than this. But yeah, I'm So Lonely is it's the music's not very good, and that's what kind of hurts the song. It's a shame that he didn't use this song on an earlier album when they were making good albums with good music, or on a later album when he kind of bounced back, because there's a good song in here. It's just the music's not very good. A little bit of sax. It sounds like Clarence Clemens from Bruce Springsteen, but in all that, I'll go ahead and give the song a 4, because there is a good song in there. It just doesn't come off that well because the music's not that great. Number 4 song is called Where I Belong, which is by Carl and Bruce, and Carl and Al sing lead. Nice love song, nice lyrics. Music, again, sucks. Just cheesy, bad, soulless 80s schlock. I give it a 3 just because of some nice lyrics, and the singing's okay. Number 5 is I Do Love You, which is written by Stevie Wonder. Carl and Al sing it. This is the first song on the album that actually has, for the most part, real instruments as opposed to synth drums and drum machines and synth guitar and all that cheesy stuff. So I mean, you got some nice keyboard, nice harmonica, which is all right in there. Stevie Wonder, also by the mid '80s, was, he's great, one of the greatest ever, but he pretty much lost it after Songs in the Key of Life, and soul music in the mid '80s which had been so wonderful and great through the '60s and the '70s. It was pretty much lost all its balls by the '80s, with the exception of Prince and maybe one or two Michael Jackson songs. But I mean, by the time of this came around, this is when you're getting into the really crappy stuff that passed for soul. We believe that children are the future and those kind of shit songs. So even though this is the great Stevie Wonder writing the song, it's not a very good song. This is more I Just Called to Say I Love You Stevie than Sir Duke Stevie or Superstition Stevie. So I give it a 2. Number 6 is, and that's the final song on the album, It's Just a Matter of Time, written by Brian, sang by Brian and Mike. This is a nice song. It's doo-wop, kind of a mournful, longing doo-wop song. Got good vocals by both of them. And Mike, I don't think he's really all that present on this album for the most part, mainly some backup vocals, but he and Brian, as much as I rag on Mike, he does a good job here, so does Brian. I give it a 4.5. Overall, this is a album that probably never should have happened. It's an irrelevant album. Certainly not the place to start with the Beach Boys if you're looking into them. There's really the first song and the second and the last song are pretty good. That's really about it. I guess I'm So Lonely, even though the music sucks on it, is alright. But if I was to put together a compilation of Beach Boy songs for, nobody really does mixtapes anymore or whatever, but I don't know there's anything at all that I would pick off of this. I might go with Get You Back and It's Just a Matter of Time, but if they weren't there, I really wouldn't miss them. There's really no reach out and grab you song here. There's really nothing that sticks in your memory after you, and I played this quite a few times to get a feel for it, and most of these songs I can't even remember right now thinking back of them, and I just played this before I did the review to refresh my memory. Overall, this album, I'll give it a 1.5, and I was going to give it a 1, but because there's a couple of songs that are okay, I'll go and be generous and give it a 1.5. It's crap, and so once great band reduced to that is kind of sad to see. But like I said, there's 4 more albums to go. Maybe things will get better, maybe they'll get worse. We'll see. Anyway, that's the Beach Boys, and that's not one you need to go rush out and buy.